Our last speaker before coffee break is another world-renowned jewelry expert. If you watch BBC One, you might know her from TV. She's a TV celebrity, Joanna Hardy. She was the host of the Antiques Roadshow in the UK for 17 years. She's a fellow of the Gemmological Association of Great Britain, as many of us are here as well. I am also an FGA. And she has been involved in so many projects for education and as an author. She's the author of those 3 fabulous books, Emeralds, Rubies, and Sapphires, that most of you, I'm sure that you have in your libraries. And she has been awarded, she's a trade warden of the Goldsmiths company, and that is very posh. Ladies and gentlemen, a big, warm, how do you say this in English? Round of applause for Joanna Hardy.
I'm going to plug myself in here. Good morning. How lovely to be here. It's my first time at the ICA, and it's a great privilege to be here, so thank you for inviting me. Well, I was asked by Fuli Gemstones if I could talk about Peridot. And at first, I must say, I thought, well, that'll only take me 10 minutes. But very quickly, I realized that this was really a fabulous gemstone with a great history and a great story. Now, I'm going to fit in an hour's presentation in half an hour. So I'm going to gallop along, and I hope you'll stay with me. So Peridot, it's an extraordinary stone. Not only has it a long history, nearly 5,000 years, in fact, in terms of man discovering the gem, it is one of the few gems that is formed deep in the magma of the Earth's upper mantle, approximately 400 kilometers deep, which has been brought up through volcanic eruptions, or in the case of Burma, formed through tectonic plate movement. Peridot is a gem-quality variety of the mineral phosphorite, which belongs to the olivine group. Peridot is the trade name for the yellowish-green to vivid green gem-quality variety of olivine. The origin of the name Peridot is uncertain. It can be traced back to the 13th century, to the French word peridot, which then was a generic term for a green gemstone. Back then, stones were classified based on their observed properties, such as color, transparency, hardness, and even qualities attributed to gender. Hence why Peridot was confused with topaz and emerald due to these similar properties. It was originally called Topazian after the island of Topazius, now Zabagad, an important source of the gem since ancient times. During the 18th century, for reasons that are not clear, the name topaz was reassigned to the stone we call topaz today. And the name Peridot was adopted for the stone around 1790. Untreated, its distinctive colors range from pure green, yellowish green, greenish yellow, brownish green, and brown. All depends on the deposit and how nature has mixed the ingredients to make a peridot, which mainly is colored by iron. Pliny, the great Roman naturalist, referred to topazian, the color that of fresh oil or damp moss in the evening sunlight. Not sure that's a marketing winner. This crystal here that we're seeing is one of the largest peridot crystals weighing 686 carats, and it is in the Natural History Museum. But it's all about color. We humans instantly react to color. The color green is associated with nature, rebirth, paradise, hope. From a historical point of view, all gemstones have been associated with talismanic properties. Egyptians believed that peridot glowed in the dark and were called night emeralds because, according to Greek texts written in the 2nd century BC, describing the mining process on the uninhabited island of Zabagad in the Red Sea, said that during the day the gem was hard to find because of its glare from the overwhelming brightness of the sun. But at nightfall, the green shone through, and it was visible from far away. And because of this, they were called the gem of the sun. So even Cleopatra's collection of emeralds would have easily included peridots. Along the Silk Road of 5,000 miles since 120 BC, many products and ideas were exchanged and traded. Different faiths were also about politics and success, were contested. Trading in spices, textiles, language, music, the arts. Peridot, as we now call it, has been used since antiquity, when it was first discovered on a small island in the Red Sea in 1500 BC, where fine gem material was found. As mentioned in ancient times, gem olivine was known as topazion or topaz, from the Greek word topazos, meaning to seek, apparently in reference to the difficulty ancient sailors had in finding the island, as it was often shrouded in fog. Other peridot deposits are shown on the map, but it has not been proved as yet if ancient peridot came from anywhere else other than that from Zabagad Island. According to textual descriptions from ancient writers, this could change if scientific research could be applied to ancient jewels set with peridot. Zabagad Island in Egypt. The island has gone under a few name changes. First called Serpent Island because of all the snakes that inhabited the island. Island of Death because of the extremely harsh conditions. It has no fresh water other than a couple of wells made by miners that caught rainwater. No trees and no animals except the fish life and sea turtles that were hunted for their shells. The island was a closely guarded secret by the Egyptians, and it was instant death if anyone tried to get to the island. Egyptian kings ordered the discoveries to collect gems and deliver them to the royal gem cutters for polishing. The island of Topazis, followed by St. John's Island, and now presently Zabagad Island in Egypt in the Red Sea, is the only source of peridot proven to have been known in antiquity, although the scope of trade and literary references suggest other localities may have been known. Through history, the island has been lost and rediscovered many times. Mining activity on Zabagad would have closely mirrored the rise and fall of the port city on the mainland, Berenice, which was opposite the island. The port city was abandoned by the mid-6th century AD, which meant mining the island was also abandoned. It was nearly 1,500 years later that peridot was once again sourced. The locality was rediscovered around 1900 and continued being mined sporadically until the 50s, when the island was finally abandoned. Miners also doubled up as sea turtle hunters, which is the most frequently mentioned trade commodity in the 1st century AD, and Pliny mentions that the shell was popular for plates and decorative elements, and probably turtle shell was equally valuable to the miners as topazis peridot. And there are still remnants of shells on the islands. There would have been about 10 to 20 miners on the island at any one time. These pictures have come from James Harrell in 2010, who is a professor of archaeology, geology at the University of Toledo in USA, along with Elizabeth Bloxon, who's also a lecturer at the University of Melbourne, Australia. They both visited Zabagad Island to investigate the Roman peridot. You see ahead the mountain, which is called Peridot Hill, where on the southeast shore, on the lower slopes, where workings of the ancient mines, and then just below that are some of the modern excavations, along with ruins in 2 areas and a well-trapped runoff rainwater. The modern workings only started where the ancient ones ended, and so left the earlier mines undisturbed. Both James and Elizabeth found fragments of crystals left behind on the surface, which were an indication that the miners had been after bigger crystals of at least a couple of centimeters. They found about 150 open pits, each approximately 20 meters across. The island was subsequently occupied by the Egyptian army and is now a conservation area. And you can see here the cabochon cut peridots from the Zabagad Island, and one of the peridots was crossed polarization, shows that it is a twinned crystal, which is rare in peridot. In antiquity, Beads or other personal adornments were among the principal devices for transmitting social and economic information over large distances. Beads had various functions. They were markers of identity, social status, economic progress, and stability. Beads were often made from accessible materials, but occasionally exotic rocks imported from far away were also recorded, such as obsidian, turquoise, amazonite, amethyst, serpentine, and peridot. Peridot, being between 6.5, 7 on the hardness scale, meant that it was probably cut with flint or quartz, both being harder. The source of these beads have not been traced. In the next few slides, I will show you some peridot cameos and intaglios. In Roman and Egyptian times, it was all about blocks of color. To the ancients, color was no mere decoration. Related to unseen and mysterious forces, color was tied to the sun, sky, earth, stars, and the rainbow, and the color had a mystery and a magic all of its own. This pendant actually represents a tricky dilemma for gemmologists. Dr. Jack Ogden, back in the 70s, viewed this pendant in the British Museum, which had been described as being set with green glass, got the British Museum to test it, as he suspected it to be peridot, which indeed it was. However, today it is still described as green glass on the British Museum website. Note to British Museum. This issue is not an isolated case, as has been previously mentioned, and there's a science historian, R.J. Forbes, wrote in the 60s that he was concerned that there was no precise information on the variety and number of ancient gems in museums, and it is high time that they were probably identified by experts, as this would give us statistical, chronological data on the use of various gems all throughout antiquity. We would glean far more information about trade and gem deposits rather than relying on ancient texts, where interpretations are constantly changing through language, mistranslations, misspellings, which have just been repeated. Cameos and intaglios would serve as an amulet or talisman. It was also a way of communicating wealth, status, power, and learning. Remember, many people could not read or write, and also the world was explained by means of myths, legends, and gods, whose powers were often represented through the carved image. They were worn for a purpose. When scenes, portraits, and myths were carved in certain stone materials, they had their magic reinforced to have the material in a special color amplified that messaging. The earliest known use of peridot in ancient glyptic occurred in the Hellenistic period of 323 to 30 BC, and the latest date is around 5th to 6th century AD. Medusa, who's depicted here, was a deadly gorgon, usually with wings and snaky hair, and usually Medusa is depicted staring straight at you. The presence of Medusa on armor reinforced the idea that her presence held significant power to protect the wearer against enemies. But it is interesting to see she is carved in peridot with her eyes shut. So here is a rare instance of a non-frontal, non-staring Medusa. She's sleeping. The threat of her power is concealed and contained. Indeed, she is portrayed as a peacefully sleeping human figure, and in peridot, which was believed to protect you from nightmares. Medusa also represented the feminine power. She's usually depicted with snakes in her hair, and it seems too coincidental that she is carved in a gemstone that came from the island of snakes. Remember, nothing in these early years was done without a lot of thought. And here we have a peridot intaglio of a Maynard, a female servant and priestess of the Greek god of wine, Dionysus. The color green was always associated with nature and fertility, hence depicting a female servant to the god of wine being carved in peridot. Apollo has many meanings. He was the Greek god of the sun. Hence why this image has been carved in peridot, being believed by the Egyptians to be the gem of the sun, as well as Apollo representing light, music, truth, healing, poetry, and is here depicted with an arrow, representing that he had slain the python monster who lived near Delphi, the center of the world, and Apollo then took over Delphi, and later he used his plague arrows to shoot the enemy during the Trojan War. I find it serendipitous that peridot, which we have since discovered was formed deep within the earth, is here being associated with Apollo and Delphi, which was the ancient center of the world. Of course, Cleopatra was often been associated with her likeness being carved in emeralds because of the emerald deposits in the Egyptian desert. But it is interesting to see her likeness has also been carved in peridot. And here is another intaglio of a female head wearing a diadem, and again, green associated with the flooding of the Nile and fertility, so it would be fitting to have your portrait in a green gemstone. Humans have always associated gems with talismanic properties, so it wasn't long before man was using gemstones in connection with worship. Gems having been created from earth, and because of their ability to resist deterioration, are a constant, were then valued and chosen for sacred purposes. There are many mentions of gemstones in the scriptures. It's the air conditioning. This is an incredible jewel, a metaphysical prophylactic jewel. Probably won't be able to say that later on today. It's a magical jewel made in England in 1540 to 1560. It's in the Victoria and Albert Museum. In the Middle Ages, life was very harsh. The multitude of diseases, constant fear of sudden death, and the mistrust of life's unpredictable twists and turns only confirmed the need to supplement one's religious faith. Believing in combinations of words and materials from the natural world, like this pendant, evoked a sense of safety and a moment's relief from a very unpredictable world. This jewel is a combination of belief in gemstones having magical powers emphasized by words also touching the skin for extra potency. Displayed in the Victoria and Albert Museum, this gold pendant is set with 3 stones, a peridot, a hessonite garnet, and a blue sapphire drop. But when turned over, it reveals a darker side. The reverse reveals black enamel inscriptions in Latin describing Jesus Christ, the Virgin Mary, and God, respectively. It was a magical word to ward off the demons that believed to present themselves in epilepsy sufferers. And it was also used to protect against intoxications, not only alcohol, but also poisons that could have been hidden in food and drink at the time. The combination of the stones was also important. Peridot was believed to dispel nightmares. Garnets were believed to cheer the heart and drive away sorrow, while protecting the wearer from pestilent diseases. The sapphire bestowed on the wearer protection against a multitude of ailments, as well as promoting peace, constancy, and freedom from fear or envy. The energy from these stones and the potent words, both touching the skin together, made this jewel a formidable talisman. Jewels of this period in their original condition are extremely rare, as many would have been melted down, lost, or remodeled according to changes in fashion or purpose. Surviving jewels are invaluable in giving us an insight into society's beliefs about metaphysical ideas, which were beyond the physical and no less a part of reality. But how did peridot get to be the gem that would ward off nightmares? Old myths are resilient, and even though at the time this pendant was made, Europe was entering the age of reason and science, however, the belief in the magical and healing properties of gems by no means died out. Madness was connected to the moon. You can be touched by the moon. The word moonstruck can still mean mad, and the English word lunacy comes from the Latin for moon. So where does peridot fit in? Pliny, The Roman naturalists wrote about gems and their actual physical properties, not about their supposed magical powers. Pliny noted that peridot topazius was soft and could be marked by an iron file. He actually says it can be touched by a file. The Latin for file is linum, L-I-N-A-M. A medieval monk later was copying this section, and he wrote lunum, L-U-N-A-M, which means moon. So peridot had been touched by the moon instead of the file, which meant the stone would attract the bad influence of the moon, absorbing the bad energy, thus protecting the wearer from going mad. And that's probably how peridot became the protector against madness, all through a change of one letter. Lost in translation, for sure. And now we'll go through sort of jewellery history again, but with peridot as the main stone, of course. So here we have a beautiful necklace and pendant that the Prince Regent, the future George IV, sent to Miss Coates to wear at the marriage of his daughter, Princess Charlotte and Prince Leopold of Saxe-Coburg. But a note in it was referring to these stones as chrysolites, a name often incorrectly given to describe peridot during this period. And here is the set in its box. And of course, from a historic point of view, from historians, boxes are equally important. It can tell you so much about if the jewel is original, where it has come from, has it been changed or altered? And you can see here, during this period, you would wear the whole parure. You'd wear the bracelets, you would wear the earrings and the necklace and the pendant and the brooch all at once. The Order of the Golden Fleece is an order of chivalry founded by Philip the Good in 1396. And here the symbols are representing the flint being struck by steel, surrounded by flames, and the fleece symbolizing the Greek myth Jason retrieving the fleece of the golden ram. This was made in 1817, 1890 in Vienna in Austria. And it's saying, its meaning is it strikes before the flame flickers. This necklace represents 250 years of European history, for every European ruler passing through or governing Naples has added something to this devotional necklace that St. Januarius since the 1700s. Since 1679, the top layer was to decorate the bust for the procession, but it was not rich enough, so they added jewels. The Savoy family donated the peridot cross and the pendant seen below. And here, of course, we've got a tiara with the diamonds and the Maltese cross, and of course these quite advanced shapes for the peridots, the way that they were cut. And this was a beautiful, I promise you I did it slowly, not quickly like that. But it was a beautiful peridot from Burma that was being sold at, I think we're giving us all a headache. Oh, carry on. And this, which was an amazing parure, Devant de Corsage, the Austrian attributed to the goldsmith Gottsched, who became the court jeweler for the Habsburgs. And it was from a European aristocratic family. In 2001, Sotheby's sold this. Unfortunately, the estimate was at the time for the whole parure set was 100,000 to 150,000 pounds. We might put a few noughts on that by now, but it was quite an amazing set to sell. It has since been sold on. The pieces were bought with Fred Leighton, who then Lily Safra bought the pieces, and then some of them were sold at Christie's in 2012. And this, you can see the Archduchess Isabel, Duchess of Teschen, wearing the spectacular Habsburg peridot parure at the coronation of Emperor Charles I of Austria as King of Hungary in 1916. there she is there. Sorry, I didn't put that on. And this was the old, first, the Sotheby's illustrations. And you can see there the necklace. And if the tiara wasn't big enough, you'd unscrew the drops and you'd then screw them onto the top of the tiara. Just to make it even bigger, it was enormous. And the people, the European aristocratic, there was a lady from Europe. She went over to California. She took the parure with her. And in her will, she left it to her cleaning ladies. When she died, the solicitor phoned them up and said, "We have something for you." They went along to the office, and they suddenly saw that they were given this whole entire parure set. And of course, they didn't quite know what to do with it, other than they went to Sotheby's in California. And at the time, in 2000, so the antique jewelry was being sold in London. So then the pieces came over to London to be sold. And they, I don't think, had been out of California, let alone across the pond. But they came over to Bond Street to watch their pieces being sold. And they didn't want to move. They felt that they'd been flown to Mars. They were so uncomfortable in this kind of environment. And the price just was going up and up and up. And it went for £300,000 at the time. Everyone had left, but they were still sitting there. They couldn't believe it. And they just said, "We think we're going to buy a house now." So it all went to a good home. And here we've got a lovely 1870 necklace set with peridots and diamonds, which was sold at Christie's. And then we've got designs, the Hennel archive, as well as the archive in the V&A, showing the peridots. And then we've also got Carlo Giuliano, who was at the same period as Castellani, as we've heard, with this beautiful peridot. And the genius of the Art Nouveau period, René Lalique, and this is a peridot pendant made in 1900. And this lovely peridot diamond suite in Cartier, which is in the Cartier physical vaults in Geneva, which I was very fortunate to go and see. And beautiful, absolutely stunning material. And the bracelet, the actual sort of lozenge-shaped stones, the peridots, the sort of cut, buffed shape as well. And this is a 12 to 13 carat peridot, a Cartier. And this amazing necklace that was designed by Salvador Dali, made by Charles Valiant. It was first sold at Sotheby's in April 1986, and then subsequently it was sold in 2005 at Christie's. It's always so satisfying when you see jewels that are so beautiful and they stay beautiful. And it's been mentioned before, we will all go off into wherever, but hopefully these jewels will stay on the earth and adorn future people and find their future custodians, and don't get broken up. That's what I'm saying, really. And here we've got Vidora peridot, a yellow sapphire and white diamond necklace. Beautiful color combination. And Jean Schlumberger, who's a designer for Tiffany & Co., and he designed this seahorse. Of course, Elizabeth Taylor had one of these. And then you've got the firecracker brooch designed by Tiffany & Co. As we've heard, in the 40s, it was a period of bold jewelry. And it was quite experimental. I mean, René Boivin and Suzanne Belperon was she was an assistant to René Boivin and her designer before she went out on her own. But you can see here this wonderful color combinations and the use of peridot with all these other sapphires and citrines are really quite stunning and quite ahead. They were both quite ahead of the game of their period. And Van Cleef & Arpels, the peridot and diamond jewelry belonging to Peggy Rockefeller. And it also came with ear pendants and a bracelet. And of course, very traditional Van Cleef & Arpels, you can detach the front and you can wear it as a brooch. When I'm doing the BBC Antiques Roadshow, we have about 4,000 people that come to the site, and we're usually in a stately building in the middle of nowhere. And so you've got no time to research anything, and people come and they show you pieces that they don't know anything about, and you will value it on camera because you need to get their reaction first time around. And this was a lovely Peridot brooch that came and was shown. And what's so nice about Peridot, of course, which makes it so easy when you haven't got any tools, is that you've got the doubling of the back facets. And when I see that, I just think, oh, good, it's a Peridot. And so, of course, this is due to the high birefringence, which is 1.65 to 1.69. This is a close-up of the Peridot, of the doubling of the back facets, which is when the light enters the stone. It is split into two rays, each traveling at 90 degrees to the other in different directions and at different speeds. And it is this that causes the double refraction. Also, another typical inclusion you'll find is the lily pad inclusions, often found in Peridot. And these are formed by fractures surrounding a small crystal, which are typically the cause. Sometimes you can see tiny black spot inclusions, which are mineral crystals. And you have here, it's quite a different places of where you will find Peridot. And of course, as we've heard, each location, each deposit is going to have its unique. And I've got speeding along, 0 time, right? And we heard here from Jeffrey, who told us about these wonderful Peridots that are in the Smithsonian Institute. And these range from 5 continents, from Egypt, Myanmar, Pakistan, Arizona, Norway, and Antarctica. There you go, there they are. And of course, Peridot is ancient, but olivine is found in pallacite meteorites, reminiscent of our solar system's birth, which is really quite an extraordinary occurrence as well. And this is a close-up. It was actually in Fries where I saw this, which is absolutely stunning. And this was a beautiful orthorhombic crystal structure, which Peridot comes in. And this is from Burma. I was in Mr. Verasak's office in Bangkok is where I saw that. And you can also get cat's eye Peridot, rutilated Peridot, Pakistan, star Peridot from Burma as well. And this is from Himalaya. And of course, we have Fuli Gemstones, who has sponsored this talk. And their mining project is located in the foothills of the tranquil Changbai Mountains. And it's the largest deposit in the world. It was first discovered in the 1960s by local geologists, but was left dormant. And 50 years later, it was developed by Fuli Gemstones, who discovered olivine-bearing basalt deposit in 2016. And this is what is the last, is what's interesting with this olivine is that it is the most common mineral on Earth, and there are exciting developments being discovered. And it has been found that olivine absorbs carbon dioxide through a chemical reaction, similar to rusting of iron metals. But instead of iron and water and oxygen equals rust, the reaction for olivine with CO2 water and silicate and calcium carbonate and magnesium ions will make olivine a natural air purifier, sucking CO2 out of the sky and ocean and locking it up in harmless products that can protect things such as the coral reefs. The basalt can be repurposed for construction purposes. And also, Peridot from this mine has strong pluricrism and lower iron content, which if cut on the axis will make the gemstone a purer green, unlike other Peridots in the Chiang Mai mountain range. So it is a very exciting material in so many ways. And there's collaborations that Fuli Gemstones are working with, and they're also great supporters of young jewelers and finding young talent, which is just so important today, as we heard yesterday. I'm whipping through these. 2 slides left. And there you have the Peridots that have been cut by Mark Newell, and he has made these incredible stones from 14 characters to 2 6 characters. And here they are, absolutely stunning. Each one is a one of a kind. He doesn't follow any traditional skill pattern for cutting. And lastly, you'll see here that we will see the St. Edward's crown at the coronation of King Charles III. It was remade in 1961. And the gem of the sun is right bang smack in the middle. So thank you very much. We will enjoy Peridot in May, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Joanna. Sorry for the pressure, but I had to keep things in order. Thank you so much. It was a delight to see. I believe that many of you had no idea that Peridot have been so popular in jewelry since antiquity. And even in high-end jewelry throughout the 19th century and 20th century, Peridot was actually a major gemstone. So thank you very much for bringing us to that knowledge.